Hi, welcome to Fitness 40 and Beyond. Join me in my recovery journey from leukemia diagnosis back to fitness and well-being. Also with advice for those over 40 on fitness, well-being and overall general health. Just like to take this opportunity to thank you if you are a returning viewer and you're a subscriber. Thank you very much. Please don't forget to hit the bell so you receive the latest updates from Fitness 40 and Beyond. If you are new here, welcome and thank you for joining me. And please, if you do like the videos, please do feel free to subscribe. Do press the like button and also hit the bell button as well so you can get the latest updates from Fitness 40 and Beyond. Today we are going to talk about what is chronic myeloid leukemia, which is the condition that I was diagnosed with earlier this year. I've got some reading aids which I am going to be referring to, so if you see my gaze is distracted a bit, it's just because I'm looking at this. I'm not the world expert, but from the things that I have picked up, I've made little notes to remind myself. So yeah, please do share, most importantly. So without further ado, let's get to it. So what is leukemia? Well, the word is broken down into two parts. Leuk is referring to white blood cells and emia is referring to condition of. So it's condition of the white blood cells. Your blood, white blood cells, platelets, red blood cells, all these things that flow through you, they're all produced in your bone. So these are the blood stem cells that are produced in the bone. And what happens in leukemia, in a nutshell, is that there is an overproduction of these white blood cells. Now, if you can imagine, you have a certain number of cells produced in your body which are there to keep your body operating at its optimum capacity. It should all be even, everything in your body has function and everything should be producing as it should be. This is unfortunately not happening in leukemia's case. What is happening here is that it's crowding out the production of any other type of blood cells because it's being overproduced. Yeah. So if you think that you're producing new blood cells and then these older existing blood cells, you know, there's too many of them, then when the new ones are trying to come up, it makes it overpopulated. So there's nowhere for them to go but to other parts of your system, which makes it very unhealthy for you. And I'm going to get to that when I get to the symptoms, when I talk about the overproduced cells going elsewhere. From what I have actually researched, this type of leukemia, I think, accounts for 1 to 2% of all leukemias. So this chronic myeloid leukemia is quite rare, and I think according to Bloodwise, let me have a look here, because according to Bloodwise, it only makes up for a small number of people. So it says here it's quite rare. There are only around 750 new cases of this chronic myeloid leukemia every year. So in the general, main of things, it's quite a small percent, so it is still quite a rare illness that we're dealing with here. It mainly affects people in their 60s. It's not uncommon for people in their 40s to be affected with this illness, but it's mainly associated with those 60 plus. And unfortunately, a lot of people have asked me, well, what are the causes of this? And the medical term would be it's idiopathic, which means that basically nobody knows. Yeah, no one knows. There are a couple of risk factors. So your age, and like I said before, it's common in those over 60. Your gender, it's more common in males than in females. There is one which is much less likely, which is exposure to high levels of radiation. And I mean, we're looking at things like Chernobyl. If you're old enough to remember the Chernobyl disaster, you'd have to be exposed to really high levels of radiation. Also, if you have a family history, I have a family history of cancer, not necessarily leukemia, but I do have a family history of cancer. So this would have increased my risk factors for developing an illness related to cancer, and in this case, chronic myeloid leukemia. It's important to note though, okay, so there are two different kinds of leukemia. So you have the acute myeloid leukemia of this type that I'm talking about. You have an acute myeloid leukemia where the blood cells from the myeloid stem cell are increasing rapidly. So you'd have more immature blood cells with acute myeloid leukemia. So it's not to be confused. Chronic and acute are quite different. And these immature cells, they increase more rapidly over a few days. Whereas chronic myeloid leukemia, you've got blood cells from myeloid stem cells which increase more slowly. So that could be over weeks or months. And these, you tend to see that they are the more mature blood cells that are found because they're actually been in your system longer. Going back to what I was saying earlier then about these excess blood cells being produced, what happens to them? Well, what then tends to happen is that they have a knock-on effect to other parts of your body. And in order for the platelets and the other white blood cells to kind of be disposed of and transferred to another part of the body and to be processed and destroyed, they need to kind of be filtered through to the liver and the spleen mostly, which is why some of the symptoms that you would experience when you are diagnosed would be abdominal fullness. Because the spleen and the liver are expanding as well, it kind of crowds out your stomach, so you tend not to feel so hungry, which is what was happening to me, which is why I was losing a lot of weight. And it basically, it crowds out your stomach, basically. So it makes you feel full, it leaves you feeling bloated. And what the consultant did when she was giving me my initial diagnosis and checkup is she felt along my stomach to see if there was that bloating. The medication that they gave me actually helped to acutely shrink all of this stuff. I think it was hydroxycarbamide was the name of the medication. And this really helped greatly with reducing my spleen size, my liver size, and cutting down these overproduced white blood cells really quickly. The other symptoms that I had were blurred vision, and some of the research is that what would happen is that some of your blood vessels would burst over time, and what was happening is that the blood vessels in my eyes were the ones that were bursting, and hence why I was seeing like an insect-like shape, a black insect-like shape in my eye. and that was the blood vessel that had burst. If you remember in the prior video that I said that when I was working on the night shifts, the words seemed to be like grains of sand coming off the piece of paper, and then later on the traffic signs, and that was my blood vessels were bursting, and my vision was becoming blurred, and that was one of the first signs and symptoms that I had this illness. Another thing as well is the fevers and the night sweats, and that is due to an increased white blood cell count as well. The fatigue and tiredness, obviously, as well, with an increased number of white blood cells. You get more fatigue, loss of colour as well, and I've got to say that since as well taking the medication, because it's been killing off those excess white blood cells, it's also had one of the side effects of actually destroying my melanin receptors. So as you can probably see from my hands, I've noticed it on my face and other parts of my body, my feet, and then kind of spreading to the rest of my body, that I have started to become quite pale. And now I actually can't go into direct sunlight for too long without putting on some sun protector. But that's, you know, that's another story. The other things of note is that you get the loss of appetite. So like I say, with your spleen and your liver increasing, there's no wonder why there as well. So, you know, I suppose they caught it quite early for me, and they say 90% of the people that have CML are caught, well, they present with asymptomatic, they present as asymptomatic, which means that they have no symptoms. But it's only probably in the, when you've been in the chronic phase for a while, then these symptoms start to show themselves. So I was informed that I had the illness for just over a year. So my phase had moved on, which I was lucky that I hadn't actually moved into what is called the accelerated phase. But the symptoms don't change much from the chronic phase, but according here, progression to this stage is measured by looking at changes in your blood, bone marrow, and blast count. Now, the blast cells are what are produced in the blood, basically. And if I have a look here, okay, so basically the in this phase, it's rare for people to be diagnosed in this phase, and it's known as a blast crisis, and it's really rare with the current treatment for people who are diagnosed in the chronic phase to progress to the blast phase. With the treatment that I'm on, it's a kind of tablet called tyrosine kinase inhibitor, or TKI. And basically, the tyrosine kinase is a protein which basically instructs the cells to continue dividing so that they produce more and more. And what these TKIs do is they will basically just kind of surround it, clamp it, and say, no, you're not gonna cause this cell division anymore, and it kind of just quarantines it, for want of a better word. From the research that I have been doing with this drug that I'm on, imatinib, and you know, there may be other TKIs out there which I don't know about, but without this, my prognosis would have been pretty dire. Before the introduction of this drug, the survival rate, the prognosis was, you'd had 3 to 5 years to live from diagnosis. Now, with this medication, you can live as full a life as anyone else, which I'm very thankful for. The last phase of this, and I'm just going to read here, would be the accelerated phase is the next, and the blast phase is the last phase. I'm very sorry. So it's very rare for people to be diagnosed at the blast phase. I stand corrected if I'd given incorrect information earlier. The blast phase basically is where you are on your way out, and the prognosis isn't very good. So luckily, this phase that I was diagnosed at, which is the chronic phase, I was quite lucky that I recognized that something wasn't right, and I went to have a look at things. B, that the opticians, that they did a thorough investigation of my eyes, and they found that there was something wrong, and they referred me, and the third thing would be that when I went to Moorfields, they actually were thorough, and they acted upon things as quickly as they did. So I'm grateful for all these 3 things. So that, in my own layman's terms, there are a lot more accurate scientific descriptions of and explanations of what chronic myeloid leukemia is, but that's just my understanding of it. Please, if you have more information as well, do feel free to comment at the bottom as well, and give your input. If you know of anyone who is currently suffering with this illness, or has just recently been diagnosed, or has been living with this condition for a long while, please do also comment as well. And I think that is as much as, for today. The more that I find out about this illness, and the treatments for it, and the different scientific advances with regards to treating this illness, I will be posting videos up. Like I say, I'm not the world expert, but as a patient, this is my understanding of things. There are a lot of resources online where academics can go for a more scholarly approach to information. But I'd like to thank you for joining me today. This is Drew from Fitness 40 and Beyond. Once again, thank you for joining me today. If you did find any of the information that I talked about today useful in any way, please do, by all means, put the thumbs up and like. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel and this would be of interest to you, please do hit the subscribe button. If you are an existing subscriber and you would like regular updates, or you want to be notified as soon as a video is posted, please do hit the alarm bell. I will be posting again on Friday, and it will be one of my workout videos on Friday, so please do stay tuned for that. Until then, thank you for joining me. This is Drew, and you have been watching Fitness 40 and Beyond.